No, I don't really know what sort of witty thing to say at the beginning of this movie, so I'm going to say two different ones. Why do the posters suck so bad for this movie and the last movie? For some reason, Sony just can't design a good Spider-Man poster for the MCU. And second, we all really wanted this movie to be good because of Jake Gyllenbeard. I mean, Beard Gyllenhaal, right?
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can, spins a web any size.
Spider-Man, Far From Home. So not only is Spider-Man Far From Home a sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming from 2 years ago, it's also the first movie that actually takes place in such a way that it can deal with the effects of Thanos' snap and the Hulk snap. So due to that, they have a lot of explaining to do on the logistics of how all of that worked and how the world has moved on since then. And it, I'll admit, does weigh the movie down in the very first part of it. But I'm going to break this movie down into not just 3 acts, but 3 parts, like a magic trick. You have the Pledge, which is the first act, the Turn, which is the second act, and the Prestige, which is the third act. A lot of people will say that the first half of the movie is kind of meh, and then the second half of the movie is great. I disagree. I think the Pledge is what's difficult, and then the Turn is where everything starts to become really, way more interesting and way more exciting, and you just want to see how everything turns out. And then the Prestige is one of the best payoffs in any superhero movie I've ever seen. I will go ahead and tell you, this is my new favorite Spider-Man movie. I'm sorry, I love Spider-Verse as much as you do, but this one is something special. Now, as far as plot goes, I'm going to have to keep it very vague with you, so I will tell you what the trailers told you. Spider-Man's class is going on a tour through Europe for school, and along the way, Peter at least meets Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and they have to work together to fight these creatures from another dimension because after Thanos snapped his fingers, there was a hole torn in the dimensions. Now, if you believe that, if you believe that, then you either don't know much about Mysterio or you're just generally gullible, which isn't the worst thing in the world to be. I mean, Spider-Man's pretty gullible too. Now, I want to talk about the things in this movie that really worked for me and the things that really didn't. A lot of the humor in the movie is fantastic. It's spot on. It's great because, it's teenagers in a new setting. It's how it would be. The dialogue between the characters does still feel just as organic as it did previously, and because of that, a lot of the one-liners and stuff like that does work really well. But some of the jokes I didn't know were supposed to be jokes until after because no one in my theater laughed. And it's just like, that happens sometimes. It even happened in Shazam. They can't all be home runs, but that's fine. Especially the teachers, because their dialogue wasn't very good and their jokes just weren't very good. That's not to say that they weren't interesting characters, because they weren't, but that's for a different reason. Moving on, though. Another thing that I like is Spider-Man's kind of got survivor's guilt over what happened to Tony Stark in the last movie, so when things start unfolding later on in the movie, it makes sense for him to feel the certain way that he does about what's happening around him, and that's really all I can say about that. Also, Happy's in it, which I love because he was such a small character in the last one. Now he's like a supporting character, and I really appreciate that because I love Jon Favreau, and I can't wait for The Mandalorian to start. Although, I will say, right, one of the things that this movie rests on, one of the cruxes of it, is that Tony Stark, for no reason and with little to no foresight, was able to design something very intuitive, very quickly, and just sit it somewhere and leave instructions for somebody to tell Peter exactly what to do. And I'm just like, I can buy that maybe the brainstorming phase to actually executing the time heist took like a week or two, but come on. He was busy building the time machine. That's enough about that, though. I want to talk about Mysterio, because Mysterio is my favorite Spider-Man villain ever. And if you're like me and you love Mysterio, or you don't know who he is and don't see why you should care about him, you just don't see him being pulled off well on screen. Rest assured, he is fantastic. He is the best on-screen Spider-Man villain, and I know that I say that when we have the likes of Vulture and the Kingpin and Dr. Octopus to compare him to, but I wholeheartedly stand by that. Mysterio is my favorite on the page, and he ended up being my favorite on film. That's not even bias. It's just the things that you're allowed to do when you have a character of Mysterio's nature leads to some really interesting scenes, some great visuals, some very interesting storytelling, some creativity in the dialogue and the witticism of the characters. And it's just all backed up with some really, really solid CGI. Like, goodness gracious. There's a part towards the middle of the movie, and it's just like, what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling don't match up. I feel like I'm about to have a heart attack and nerdgasm on the floor, but I can't do that because I'm in public. And the most important thing about the movie is Spider-Man finally evolves into Spider-Man properly. He can count on himself, he can do things alone. He's finally confident in himself as Spider-Man without Tony Stark to lean on, and that was the biggest thing that I wanted out of this movie, is to see that happen, that evolution, because yeah, this is a coming-of-age story, and yeah, the last movie is a coming-of-age story, but this is the Spider-Man that he needs to be throughout the rest of the MCU, and just build off of where he is at the end of Far From Home. That's what I need. And then, after the mid-credit scenes, right, people have been saying the mid-credit scene and the post-credit scene, so very important, so great, so mind-blowing. They're not lying. At a certain point, though, the entire theater will applaud uproariously, and you will feel compelled to join into that uproarious applause. And I won't tell you not to do it, because I did it, and I never clap in the theater. But I was just like, you know what? This is it. I gotta do it. All these things considered, though, and I can't believe I'm really about to say this because I never, ever have, Spider-Man Far From Home was spectabulous. What does that even mean anymore? Spider-Man Far From Home. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever it is, whatever you think, comment below and educate me. And as always, if you want more videos, leave a like and comment something random. What's your favorite Spider-Man movie? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe if you're new, and I will get a spoiler video on this movie out to you in 2 days. Hopefully, you don't miss me too much by then. But I'll see you then.